Welcome to today's webinar, What's New with Wayland Water and Trash. My name is Kat van der Straten and I'm with Energize Wayland. Today's webinar is hosted by two organizations. The first one is the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a 100-year-old non-partisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. The League empowers voters and defends democracy through advocacy, education, and litigation at the local, state, and national levels. On the local level, the League's candidates forum will be held on April 13th, and the Town Meeting Issues Forum will be held on April 20th. The League invites you to join them and to attend their events. And we have Mary Antes here from the Wayland League of Women Voters. Mary, just maybe wave. The other host of this webinar is Energize Wayland, and I belong to that group. Energize Wayland is a group of neighbors helping neighbors do something about climate change. Please go to energizewayland.org and you will see that that's our website right there, and check it out. Today's guest is Tom Holder, the director of the Wayland Department of Public Works. Thank you, Tom, for being here and doing this for us.
My pleasure.
Some housekeeping. We will take questions after both presentations. So Tom will present on both water and on trash and recycling. After this webinar, give it a day or two, you will find a link to the recording on energizewayland.org/events, and just click on campaigns and you will see the popcorn bucket there. You'll find the link to this webinar, to the recording right there. Last but not least, please sign up on energizewayland.org. You do that by clicking on that sign up button right there. And then you will hit Energize Wayland, just go to all actions, and you will see that there are many actions that you can take to address the climate emergency. If you sign up again through this button, you will be able to say, to let us know what you're interested in. For instance, if you're interested in batteries, you can click on to do, add it to your to-do list. And then we will be able to send you an email in case there are incentives that come online for that action for batteries, in case something changes with regard to regulations, or if we have webinars or events around that action. So please sign up on energizewayland.org. and add things to your to-do list or on your done it list, of course. And that way you will never have to miss out on information about what you're most interested in. And I will pass it on to Tom to get us started on water, I believe.
All righty. Well, good afternoon, and thanks very much for having me today. I'm pleased to talk about two topics that I deal with every single day, and that's that of drinking water and also the functionality and the operations of the transfer station. So do appreciate the opportunity. So the agenda for this afternoon, I will begin with the water topic. I'm going to talk about some of the background of operational challenges that we have. We have a number of solution options. They're categorized in the short term. That would include the PFAS treatment operations that we have underway currently. And we're also embarking on an emergency connection with the MWRA, and I can give you more details on that. Long term, we've been studying this for about 15 months. It's been a topic that I know has been around for at least a decade, and that's the subject of connecting to the MWRA on a permanent basis. So we've been working with the Board of Public Works and have recently been giving some presentations of the evaluation, and which does include our recommendation. So I'll talk about the cost projections for that, the recommended long-term solution, and then offer up where we are today and next steps and timeline. The photographs that you'll see here isn't, the large one is an aerial photograph of Baldwin Pond. Let's see if I can you see my mouse?
Yes.
My mouse is hovering over. This is the treatment plant here. This is Route 27, the driveway. It's a small little driveway. Not many people even know that we're there. and it kind of winds its way. This is the golf course down back here. So it's a hidden area. And these other photos, these are photographs that I've taken from Baldwin Pond. This one here is a white egret. I was pretty pleased with that. That was probably taken at about 75 yards away, as was this of an American eagle that was seen there about a year ago, again from about 75 yards away. So just to give you a sense of the natural area that is located back there. Continuing on the second half of the presentation of the discussion, I'm going to talk about trash and recycling, offer a little background on the transfer station, and to talk to a fair amount about the amenities that we offer there. Those include the pay-as-you-throw trash program, single stream recycling, yard waste, or the organic waste program that we just began later last year. We've got programs for the disposal of mattresses and box springs, oil and other hazardous fluids, paper shredding. We've got a brand new book barn and the give and take. Those are some of the amenities. I'm going to speak about the increasing costs that we incur relative to processing, the disposal, some of the most recent regulatory requirements that cause us extra efforts and extra costs. And then to give a sense of how do we what is our income? How do we obtain revenue? And that's through stickers, bags, disposal fees, and we also participate appreciatively in a Mass DEP dividends grant program. Some of the water challenges that we have, just starting out with the water conversation, is much of our equipment is at least 10, 12, 15 years old, some of it even older. The pipe in the ground is, some of it's over 100 years old. But what we're focusing recently on is the production of water, of drinking water, the supply of drinking water, and the treatment of that. And much of our equipment is aged. Some of it is no longer manufactured. It's difficult to get parts for some of the equipment. And so we wind up having to replace it with new. And also, as a result of the pandemic, and which we're still experiencing, is supply chain issues. And as an example, I use fluoride. We fluoridate our water here in Wayland. And it's had been relatively easy to obtain fluoride, but in recent months and probably over the course of the last year, we've had a difficult time obtaining it. And we were almost at a point where we were reaching out to Mass DEP and the Department of Public Health with the state to relay our concerns about obtaining it. We were able to find another vendor, and thankfully we're in a pretty good place with that. But it just offers an example of trying to get the chemicals that we need, that we add to the raw water coming out of the ground that makes it drinkable. As an example of, and I will try not to mention things more than once. In some of the slides as I was building the presentation, I was putting in some talking points here. So I will do my best not to talk about things twice, but no longer manufactured, back to that heading. About 18 months ago, the membranes at the Baldwin treatment plant, which are on the bottom right-hand picture, we have these skids in those white canisters are the membranes. And that is what is removing the iron and manganese from the water coming out of the ground at Baldwin Pond. The manufacturer no longer makes the membranes that we initially installed. So we had to work with them in purchasing some replacement that were close to, they were just as effective, but close to what we had. And what happened was, in their manufacturer trying to alter what we were installing there, when they were installed, one half of that membrane set failed on us. And we had to take that, in essence, half of the capacity of the plant offline. And we're expecting a delivery in April of replacement set of membranes. So, since this time last year, Baldwin Pond has been operating at half capacity. So obviously that presents challenges, especially during high demand periods between May and October. But we were able to work through it last year. But Don Millette, the water superintendent, myself, will sleep a lot better once we get these new membranes in place in April. Some of the other challenges are emerging regulations. I'm sure that everybody has, heard the term PFAS. I won't even try to pronounce that, but polyfluoride substances is kind of the basic definition of that acronym. 2 years ago, the Mass DEP changed from having a regulation that allowed for 70 parts per trillion of PFAS allowable down to 20 parts per trillion. And because of that, our Happy Hollow well field triggered a violation of that MCL, which is a maximum contaminant level regulation. So because of that fact, and I'll get more into that as we progress through the presentation, we were mandated to install treatment or find some alternative water aside from Happy Hollow. So the decision was to treat it. Also, actually, our superintendent is going to be sending out a letter. There's always been a lead and copper level. That's as part of the Safe Drinking Water Act. The LCRR, the last R, is revised. It's recently been revised. There's more adamant, more restrictive protocols. So we're now, working towards performing that. The one good thing is that we have the talented staff that we have. We've got a very good relationship with Mass DEP and the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, as well as the Mass Department of Public Health. So, in working collaboratively with them, we've been able to, I'll knock on wood, provide compliant drinking water. So we're, pleased to always be able to say that. In coming years, there's UCMR 5. The 5 means this is the fifth time next year that the EPA will be coming out with emerging unregulated contaminant monitoring requirements. And PFAS was one of those. They are expanding. You'll see a lot of times things written PFAS 6. There are 6 compounds of PFAS that are focused on. Currently, they're expanding that to make it more than the 6 that we currently monitor for. So, those are the regulations that are really driving our need to be flexible and to amend what we do and how we do things. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about staffing. We have, as I mentioned, qualified, certified operators. There's a pretty stringent procedure and protocol in place to get your certification. There's a number of grades in certification that you could obtain, and we're fortunate to have those staff here. The one issue that we're facing is that industry-wide, it's difficult to attract and retain water system operators, certified operators. We've had a position open for 18 months that we've been unable to fill. We do get by. We've got an on-call rotation, and even with the reduced staffing, we've been able to maintain operations and all of that. But a continued concern is if that worsens, what will we do? It will, at some point in time, we'll be just strained, and it'll impact our ability to provide compliant drinking water. So that's something we've been paying attention to as well. In talking about PFAS here in town, I'll quickly go over this slide. So you'll see the 4 different colors of the 4 different sources of water. Blue is Baldwin, rust-colored is Campbell, gray is Chamberlain, and then yellow is Happy Hollow. So you'll see that red line is where the average for Happy Hollow is, and that's you can see that it's PFAS 6. So that is well above the 20 parts per trillion that's allowable. And then you'll see there is a seasonal implication. We've been able to, the raw water has been down, to 15, 20, just above 20. With that PFAS treatment system, we are down to a non-detect level coming out of Happy Hollow, which is what the system was designed to do. And so we're pleased that that is up and running, and I'll show you photographs and talk a little bit more about that. The problem that we're facing is that the EPA came out last July with a health advisory for PFAS. And a health advisory just takes into consideration the health impacts of PFAS on humans. And their health guideline makes the statement generally that any level of PFAS above 2 parts per trillion is unhealthy. That's not a regulation. So at this point in time, we're still mandated to provide 20 parts per trillion, but the EPA, its intent is to release draft regulations that will then support that health advisory. So they had said that it would be by the end of the calendar year last year. Here we are, it's the end of January. They have not yet come up with those draft regulations. Once they do, there will be a lengthy public comment period, more than likely 8-12 months, because this is what the state did. The Mass DEP did the same thing. They lowered their regulation from 70 to 20 in a draft format, had about a year of public comment, and then implemented the actual regulation. So the EPA is likely to take that same approach. So in speaking with my colleagues and other associates in the legislative level, we're feeling that it's likely that the EPA, in a year or two, will be mandating that communities provide drinking water that has PFAS levels at no more than 2 parts per trillion. So you can see all of our sources would at that point violate that regulation. So that's what we're trying to prepare for in our short-term efforts as well as our long-term efforts. And there you can see that's the that's where the future will be a much lower MCL. So currently, our short-term solution options is the PFAS treatment pilot program. And we work closely with the Mass DEP. Once we had 3 consecutive months of drinking water that was higher than 20 parts per trillion, we were mandated to either, find a different source or to treat the water. So among staff and the Board of Public Works, it was decided that we would treat Happy Hollow. We've been operating this system for nearly a year. Aside from some startup issues and problems that we had, the system is currently operating as designed. Like I said, it's providing water coming out of Happy Hollow at PFAS levels at non-detect. You'll see some of the photographs, and that shows you when those vessels were being placed on the pad, and some of the piping that was that's associated that was being built. And then currently, there's an enclosure over the top of this, and it's climate controlled, and we've got instrumentation that monitors everything. And so that, in essence, those blue vessels have a resin. It's an ion exchange methodology. And that left photograph just shows you a container, and it's like it's these very small beads that are through an ion exchange approach is actually able to remove the PFAS from the drinking water, and then we discharge that water into the system. Those vessels, it's this system that you're looking at right now is leased. We don't own it. We have a 2-year lease. So we've got, probably another 18 months or so left on the lease. Some of our decisions in the future will be either to extend the lease, perhaps purchase it, perhaps do something different. Right now, the Mass DEP is permitting this as a pilot program. So there's very few folks out there that are doing anything really permanent. PFAS to everybody is a new issue, and every community, every water supplier has been scrambling to try to determine the best treatment and distribution approach that's appropriate for their particular community. So these are all being permitted as a pilot program. We report to them quarterly with our findings and how it's operating. And so based upon our determination of what we do in 2 years, that permit will be renewed and probably have a different look to it. The other short-term approach that we're taking is that we are advancing an emergency connection with the MWRA. We're very fortunate in Wayland to have the MWRA's water system passing right through the town. And in knowing that this PFAS system, gave us a little trouble at the beginning, which made us fully aware that, there is some vulnerabilities there. We thought it best that we have more of a belt and suspenders approach. So we did get some funding to make the connection to the MWRA, and we're going to do that at the Holtman Aqueduct, right where it crosses Main Street, just north of where the middle school is. And right now we're working with a pump company and an enclosure company. Our engineers are designing. So it's anticipated by the end of this summer, we will have a functional connection to the MWRA, and they'll be able to provide upwards of a third of our daily water supply at that location. So with the membranes being delivered in April, getting Baldwin Pond fully functioning, with the PFAS system operating currently, and with also having this emergency connection, we will be much more confident that we're able to provide, potable drinking water should, any one of those systems need to be taken offline for repair or maintenance or emergency situations. So it really does give us a lot of redundancy, and I for one, am very supportive and pleased that we're going to have this emergency connection online. It's anticipated that we will be permitted with the MWRA. We're thinking 4 to 5 years, and this will be in place and operating through the time period where we permit, design, and construct the sought-after permanent connection with the MWRA, and then they'll no longer be a need for the emergency, and that will be dismantled. The long-term approach is, kind of broken out into two options that we have, and I'm going to get into this in more detail. But in essence, it's to maintain and invest in our local sources. So those 4 sources that I've been talking about, they all need, upgrades to outdated equipment. They're going to need additional equipment and additional kind of approaches and methodology to meet these new emerging regulations. So there's a cost to that, and we have that spelled out in our evaluation that we've been performing over the last, at least a year. And then the other option is to make a more permanent connection with the MWRA, and that would either be for full supply, we would be getting all of the town's water from the MWRA, or we could also get some of the water from the MWRA and some of the water from our local source, and we're focusing more on Happy Hollow, and I can tell you why we're selecting that location. So we started out in the evaluation with 16 options, and we wanted to at least demonstrate to decision makers here in town and all the residences and businesses in town that when we performed this, we were looking at every different opportunity. The Board of Public Works was greatly involved in this process. They had their feelers out. They were asking of myself and our engineers, what if we do this? What if we try that? Can you take a look at this and see, would this be the best? And, so there wound up being 16 different options. We reduced it down to 4 and then revised it again down to 2. And what you can see, in the metrics that I've got up on the screen is that there was a rating structure, 3 being the most favorable, 0 being the not feasible. And what we did is we were able to take those 16 down to 4, rate those, and then you can see, the 2 top was, the MWRA partial and the MWRA, fully is what those 2 options. And the ranking, what we looked at was, a 10-year capital cost, a 50-year life cycle cost, the long-term capacity of our local sources and the MWRA traffic disruptions, the complexity of operating these systems. It's a small water division, and these systems, I mean, it's been said that when you obtain your drinking water license, you've got the equivalent of a master's degree in educational, comparison. So these are highly technical operations, and so the complexity of these is also something we needed to look at. And then always, is the cost that's incurred by going forward with any of these options. So these are the two. On the left is, what we're calling, and you'll hear the term hybrid, and that is, it's a combination of MWRA water and water from Happy Hollow. And then just below that, you'll see full MWRA. And what we did is we, again, looked at, 5-10-year capital, looked at the operational costs, looked at the life cycle costs for each, what was involved. You can see in required elements, for a hybrid, what do we have to do, for our existing sources, what we would have to do to get through the next 5 years, should it be a partial or a full MWRA connection. So those are some of the things that we were looking at. And you can see the costs, are a little bit more favorable, for doing a hybrid, because we're able to produce water less than the MWRA. The increased cost for water with the MWRA is the resources that they bring, with the provision of their water. Much of my career has been with MWRA communities, and I've been witness to, their ability to respond when there's problems. And it is remarkable. It's a well-run organization. So I have, positively experienced what it's like to have them as a partner, in providing water. In talking about the permanent connection, with the MWRA, they use a different disinfection approach. That they use chloramines. It's free chlorine and ammonia, where we just use free chlorine. So we, if we are going to use a hybrid system, we are likely going to have to convert Happy Hollow to a chloramine disinfection process, which is, it's not a heavy lift. It's readily done and able to do. So we will be seriously considering that. I also want to mention that what we're promoting, and I'm going to talk a little bit later on, I'm going to talk about the Board of Public Works position on this, is that it's known that if the decision were made today, it will be 5 years before we would be able to hit the on switch with the connection, the permanent connection with the MWRA. So there's a lengthy design, permitting, and construction process that we'll have to undergo, and that's that's expected. This is a large project. I regularly call this a legacy, topic in town, a legacy decision that is being made for Wayland, to switch over and to have this much more reliable supply of water years down the road, generation down the road. I think people will be pleased that a favorable decision was made to do this. There's 64 other MWRA communities. I'm going to put up a graphic that shows that as well. The one thing that I don't know if I mentioned later in the presentation is that the MWRA, the Board of Directors, recently, last September, voted to waive the entrance fee for communities to connect, and that equates for Wayland to up to $7 million. So that is a favorable financial benefit for us to be able to do this at this time. It hadn't been that way in the past, and right now they've put a 5-year window on that. So it's something that really adds to the advantages of pursuing this connection at this point in time. The graphic that I have on the screen, it's difficult to perhaps understand. What it shows is that we are proposing that although the Metro West Tunnel and the Holtman tunnels pass through Wayland, the most feasible point of connection is at Elm Street in Framingham. And the MWRA has fortunately granted us permission, and this will all be, performed and memorialized in a legal manner, but they've given us the green light to design a system whereby we're able to use their easement, their right of way along the Holtman Aqueduct to lay our pipe to get it into Wayland. So that allows us to not have to come through Framingham city streets to get the water here. It's a positive development, which really has made us pleased that they're going to allow for that. So that it just gives you a sense of where that is, and the pump station, the proposed pump station, that's right at Wallace Street at Old Connecticut Path. That's where MWRA water would enter the town. So this just shows this is the Public Works motion that they voted on January 4th, and in essence that they are supportive in voting to advance a connection with the MWRA. Yeah, next steps and timeline. So I can certainly, it's a good time to start talking about this. Last Monday, I went before the select board with our engineer and the chair of the Board of Public Works, and the full Board of Public Works was in attendance. And we gave a presentation and updated the select board on where we are and what our desires are. We do have an article crafted for town meeting. The MWRA requires that for a town that it actually demonstrate through town meeting that it is approved to apply for admission. So that is our desire. That will likely be an article that you'll see. So we'll be talking about that through the town meeting workshops that are coming up. Preliminary design. What we're seeking for right now is just approval to make that connection at Elm Street, to bring it into Wayland, to begin the preliminary design. And that design will, in essence, work out a lot of the details of where the pump station will be located, where the pipe will be located. And it'll also give us time. At that point, we'll have a much better understanding of the EPA regulations that I was referring to earlier. So it really, the timing couldn't be any better. MWRA admission process, you can see the number of steps we have to follow. Mass Environmental Policy Act notifications and reports that we have to submit. There is an interbasin transfer. We're transferring water, in essence, from the Quabbin Reservoir to Wayland. So we have to apply for that. So it is a time-consuming. The permitting alone will probably take 8 months. So what we're planning on using, the select board has an ARPA, a subcommittee, and they have, that's the American Rescue Plan Act. They have committed $1 million of Wayland's ARPA funds towards this preliminary design. I will be seeking, through my FY24 capital request, I will be seeking the balance of that, which is about 1.02 million. So the total is 2.02. And that is the cost of the complete design, permitting, and bidding process. So with that said, I would seek, once the design is nearly complete, I'll know better on what the construction will cost. And I would be seeking that in the FY25 budget request, with construction to begin in the calendar year 26. And this graphic just shows you, to the left is where the Quabbin Reservoir is, which is on the westerly part of the state. And from there, it's conveyed to the Wachusett Reservoir. It goes through the John J. Carroll Treatment Plant, which is located in Marlborough, where the treatment of that water, fluoridation, disinfection, all occurs there. And then it passes through the Metro West Tunnel, the Holtman Tunnel, through these member communities, and terminates, in the city of Boston. The Quabbin Reservoir, some statistics, it's got 412 billion gallons of water as its capacity. And it's been said by them that if it didn't rain for 3 years, they would still have the ability to provide water to the 64 communities. So they, through the efforts of all these communities, much of my career was spent, leak detection and reducing water. they have the ability to provide, that water for that length of period of time. And so they're a well-established, well-regulated association. All right, we're going to shift gears and start talking about the town's trash and recycling program. I had talked a little bit, earlier about the agenda and talking about, customer amenities. So we do have, a pay-as-you-throw program in town. What that means is that for residents to use the facility, they have to bring their trash in bags that are purchased throughout town. You can buy them at local stores, grocery stores, hardware stores. You can also buy them here at DPW facility or also at the transfer station. So what that does is that it does two things. It does provide revenue, but more importantly, when people have to pay for their bags, they are more apt to try to use less of those bags. And the way to use less of those bags is to have less trash. And by recycling, that's how you can achieve that. So the DEP greatly, strongly encourages communities to have a pay-as-you-throw program. So we're fortunate to have that. We do have a single stream recycling program, which differs from a separation where people have to separate their paper from their glass, from their cans, from their plastic. It's single stream here, so meaning you put it all in one container, you bring it into the facility and put it into one container. We also allow members to bring in yard waste. We have the ability to receive mattresses and box springs. If they're in good condition, we recycle them. If they're in poor condition, we put them in our bulky compactor and dispose of them as trash. We accept oils and fluids. We have been holding paper shredding events, one of which was just held last October. It was well participated. We probably had over 100 participants. And so we intend on continuing that, probably once in the fall, once in the spring, that kind of a schedule. We have the give and take, which people like. If they're having a tough time parting with lightly used things in their household, they can bring them up there, place them, and people kind of pick through, and one person's trash is another person's treasure, so to speak. We also take incandescent and the LED, light bulbs and all of that up there as well. And some of the photographs you'll see, though that's on the photograph on the left, that's the container that we have that people bring in oil and those types of things. On the bottom is the give and take center, and then on the top right just gives you a sense of what that right side of the property as you drive in, the containers, the compactors. And continuing along, with the amenities, we, during COVID, some of the, things that we were doing had to be, temporarily closed down, one of which was the book barn. After, we got through the thick of the pandemic, we actually set up a new one. You can see the photograph on the bottom right, bottom left, sorry, is the book exchange. Mary Ann down there has done a nice job of setting things up. So we allow people to bring in books, take a book. It's kind of a book swap. We also accept SHARPS, the Mass Department of Public Health. We are the registered repository for SHARPS in Wayland. And so folks in their households that need to take injections for medication, they can dispose of their SHARPS directly at the transfer station in proper containers. They can also bring them to the health department at town building, as well as the public safety building where the police and fire headquarters are. They accept them, and then they in turn bring them down to us. So they eventually come down to us, and then we have a service that we dispose of those properly. We have textiles. That bottom right-hand picture shows you the bins that we have set up for. We accept the textiles on site in these bins. And we also have a program that we participate in. Now, this is associated with Big Brother and Big Sister, both of them, both these bins that you see, and the ones that you can actually have doorstep pickup. And I can certainly get more information. I don't have it up here as part of the presentation, but If you contact Big Brother, Big Sister, call them, text them, tell them what you have, where you live, they schedule a pickup where they actually come to your home and grab your, the stuff that you no longer need. The town actually has a financial benefit. For every pound, we get 2 cents a pound for the doorstep pickup, and we get 7 cents a pound for the textile bins that you see in the photograph. So we've got this nice arrangement with them, and it works out pretty well. Another thing that's quite popular is that we facilitate the distribution of rain barrels and compost bins. I know Kat is involved with the compost bins, and we have a company in Hyde Park, and every spring it will be coming up. You will have the ability to get, we'll promote the website where you get on, you register to receive rain barrels, compost bins, you pay for them through that website, and we get them shipped to us, and we have a distribution day at the transfer station where residents can pick those up. And then the most recent amenity that we've offered is what we call the WOW, which is the Wayland Organic Waste Program. In the top photograph, and you can see these are recent, they're covered with snow, these photographs, you can bring in organic waste, and we've partnered with Black Earth, and they come in and they take your composting. And what you find, and you can imagine, is that organic waste is probably the heaviest stuff that you put into your trash bag. So by finding an independent way of disposing that removes a lot of weight, which then saves us money because we pay by the ton to dispose of our trash. And and then they also convert this into composting, so there's a kind of a cyclical benefit as well. This is we don't have an unfortunately with Black Earth, you wind up having to go through them to purchase the composting, but at least people know that it's going to an environmentally sound kind of end site. A lot of folks will be asking, where does our trash and recycling go? So trash is, we have a hauling contract with BP, and they have a facility in Hudson. So it goes from here at the transfer station to Hudson, where it's transferred and then hauled, trucked down to a CMAS facility in Wareham. And that is a burn to energy facility. And the photograph on the top right is that facility. So the trash that's brought into the transfer station, at least that's the end site, and it's good to know that it's actually you used to generate electricity. Recycling, it's hauled by BP, but it's hauled to, we have a contract with Casella, and their facility is in Auburn. And so it's brought to Auburn. It's a what they call, and you can see from the photograph, it's zero sort. Single stream means the same thing. And what they do is they market it for reuse, repurpose, some domestic, some international, and there's a market for it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about market fluctuations and how that works. So the costs, and I talk about, they're variable and they're often increasing. It's rare that these costs decrease. There's one example, and I'll talk about it on this slide. The processing, we have a contract with BP for trash and recycling hauling. They're the ones that come onto the property and bring it either to their own facility or to Casella. We do have a contract with BP. The town, actually all of the town, has their trash is handled by BP. So that's, the schools, the town buildings, all of the, the library, everything is handled through BP. And we have a contract for Casella for the recycling disposal. Now, the disposal, there are large fluctuations. And a number of years ago, we were paying about $46 a ton to have it processed. We then, it had been lower. That whole thing, they call it, the China sword, where the Chinese, they increased their criteria for the quality of the material that they would accept. what was happening in the United States is that the quality was not at the level that it needed to be. There was quite a bit of contamination. So a lot of these recycling facilities had to refine their operations. But because of that, we were paying about $46 a ton. We then, the market changed a bit, and we were, the United States was able to find homes and uses for these recycled goods, a lot of it in South America. We actually were experiencing a year ago a credit. We were making $14 a ton. Recently, and I can't tell you why, but we discuss this regularly with our recycling partners at Casella, we're currently paying $88 a ton. So it makes budgeting really difficult because we budget for fiscal years 10 months in advance. And we don't have the ability to project, even predict. So we wind up crafting a budget that is in between, that it will be able to accommodate these fluctuations in recycling process. Regulatory challenges, the costs that are connected to that. The Mass DEP, they are taking a much more active role in regulating solid waste and implementing recycling programs. Mattresses and box springs, for instance, we used to have a grant where we were able to recycle mattresses and box springs. We weren't paying anything. That grant ended. We're now charged for that activity. We also are charged if a mattress or a box spring is not of a condition to be recycled and it needs to be considered trash. We're actually charged individually for each one of those. And those are reflected in some of our bulk waste charges that I'll talk about in a minute. Our waste ban contamination percentage is admirable here in Wayland. Anything under 10 is acceptable. We're right around a standard of 6%. So the staff at the transfer station really have a lot to do with that. Residents, through educational programs, we try to relay to the users, the membership, what can and cannot be put into recycling, and trying, to do our best to enforce that when people come onto the property. We do have a complimentary contamination percentage. We're also looking to make investments in the property. Those investments are large. The photograph to the right is when a brand new compactor was just installed last summer. That that was a $63,000 compactor. Currently, we're going out to bid to replace the bulky waste compactor. That's priced at $100,000. So there's, we generally borrow for those, and there's a debt service cost that's associated with each of those purchases. So on an annual basis, within the transfer station fund, we need to be accommodating that. In talking about revenue, we have this year about 1,762 households that have purchased stickers. Currently, our annual sticker is $165. Second sticker is $35. A one-time, if somebody is not a member, but they have a need to bring things down, on a one-time basis, we'll issue a one-time sticker for $40. We also, our revenue coming through our bag program, just to give you a sense, it's $5 for the small, $7.50 for mediums, and $12.50 for the larger bags, which are, those are the ones that, those are, I think, 30 or 32 gallon. Those are the ones that are more prominently used. But if you're a smaller household or a single person, the medium and smalls many times work out fine. Disposal fees, the photograph on the right shows our flyer that we put out on an annual basis. It coaches people on the do's and don'ts, what we accept, what we can't accept, our hours of operation. And then on the right hand, the bottom side, you'll see that we have things itemized as best we can on what we charge for disposal of things. So that's, you need to have a sticker to come onto the property. And then, through the cost that we incur to dispose of things, we pass that cost on to the users. I talked about the textile, the revenue that we get from that. Mass DEP dividends grant. We fill out a report. Anita in our office is currently doing that right now. It's an annual report that we submit in February. And then each June, we're granted about $5,000 a year. And that's based on the amount, the level of amenities that we offer. So all of these things, whether it's mattresses or oil or, the organics, we get credit, we get points for each of that. They add it up, and then they pass the money back to you. And then you're able to use that to offset some recycling initiatives that you implement. And recently, the last 2 years, it used to be a revolving fund, which was very difficult to maintain. Through an active town meeting, we converted over to an enterprise fund. Even with that enterprise fund and the revenue that we get, it's known that the general fund needs to offer up, over the last 2 years, it's been $75,000 that they contribute to that to be able to balance the costs and revenue, the cost and revenue stream. So in thinking, in the future, we're always looking to promote our services at the transfer station. We're trying to attract residents, to let them know what we offer, when we're open. And that's why you see us, putting up a book barn and offering, a place to place styrofoam, and people can bring in their bottles and cans. There are a number of groups in town that collect those and dispose of those. The Christmas tree program, all of these things, we're looking to attract users, to make it more of an attractive way to dispose of your trash and your things that are, kind of reusable resources. We're purchasing, electronic and a large electronic outdoor sign that will be able to allow us to better communicate with users on, some of the things we've got going on with the property. We are, responding to declining participation. I've been here 6 years, and each year, the number of households that participate as members of the transfer station is decreasing. So there's always a balance, because, one way to balance the budget is to, our costs are relatively fixed. And if you want to increase revenue, one way is to increase the costs, either to use, to buy a sticker, the disposal fees for the bulky waste, increase the price of the bags. But then when you do that, you may be driving away people, saying, you know what, it just doesn't seem like the cost is worth it. And, so it's a continual balance on trying to offer these amenities, to charge what is fair, but then also keep it at a level that's affordable. I talked about the recent conversion to the enterprise fund. There is also talk about an option to convert this to a general fund within the DPW division. Much like the highway and the parks department, they're funded. They have it's a fixed fund. It's an operational budget, and it's a very straightforward way. The finance team here in town has been advocating for this, so that is something that that may come about. The one rule about establishing an enterprise fund is that you have to have it in place for a minimum of 3 years. FY24 would be our 3rd year, so we would meet that Department of Revenue requirement. So we'll have to see for FY25 if it makes more sense to operate, as more of a general fund divisional budget. And then, there's always the consideration of converting over to a curbside program. And by curbside, we would contract with an outside vendor, and they would pick up your trash and recycling curbside. You see in other communities, the ones that I worked in prior to Wayland all had a curbside program where you've got trash totes and recycling totes, and so there is an interest and consideration being made to, does Wayland want to do that? And even if we were to do that, implement a curbside program, the property would still function as a recycling center. So we would still retain a lot of those recycling offerings on the property. And, so that's something that all of these things are things that we're currently either doing or considering. And that concludes what I've got prepared. So
Perfect
I am
timing.
ready to pass it over.
That is perfect timing. We have half an hour for questions on both topics. And I'm very proud that I found a way of putting both topics together, and that'll be it for me. I will be helping with the Q&A. But I was thinking that we really love as a family the transfer station. We go there often, and we think of it as the water cooler of Wayland. So I managed to put trash there and water in one sentence. It is really on Saturdays a nice place to be and to meet our neighbors there. So I for one am a fan. We'll be mixing up trash and water questions, Tom. So let's see how quick you are to switch from one to the other. And I think I will let Lisa Newton go first. Lisa, you'll have to unmute yourself though.
Two questions about PFAS. Would Wayland ever be able to meet the less than 2 parts per trillion? If that became a requirement, would Wayland ever be able to meet that? And secondly, does MWRA water have any PFAS in it?
So the answer to the first question is the only location that we could meet 2 parts per trillion is at Happy Hollow. That's where we've got the treatment plant operating, for PFAS. The other 3 locations range between 5 and 19 parts per trillion. So those other 3 locations would violate, and we would have to implement something similar. The construction and operation of treatment at those locations, which you can imagine. Some of the properties, it's not even possible. Chamberlain and Campbell are, along wetlands. There's very little property there. Even Baldwin at the main plant, it would be very difficult to implement treatment there. So if it gets to 2 parts per trillion, that's why in the hybrid scenario, we've selected to keep Happy Hollow. There's large real estate there. It's behind the high school. So we have the space and the ability to provide whatever treatment comes from these emerging regulations. And the MWRA does report trace to non-detect for PFAS. So they are able to meet that regulation.
Thank you.
Next up is Lee, if you want to unmute yourself.
I thank you so much. This is very informative. I typed my questions in a chat, but I could just say that, so back in July 2022, last year, the pipe broke and that had been repaired and everything is working now. Is that correct?
Yes, the system is working. The design and the allowance through water distribution standards allows for the use of Schedule 80 PVC pipe, which is what the system has there. So that pipe has been repaired. We've replaced some with stainless steel, and so that the system is we're operating comfortably. We're actually operating the system not at its full capacity. We're just trying to kind of ease back into things. Our intention would be to make some changes there so that we would be able to be operating at full capacity and having the full 900 gallons per minute passing through that treatment system. Right at the time being, we've got things throttled back a bit. But that, to answer your question, that repair was made, and the system, after it was disinfected and all of that, was reactivated.
Yes, and then in the future, if you foresee something like this happens, and we have a plan to move forward.
Yes, the plan would be, to make a repair, but as I had mentioned, is that the whole reason for the emergency connection with the MWRA is that we're not totally reliant on that PFAS system running, because we do know of its vulnerabilities. It is, in essence, permitted as a pilot, as a temporary kind of facility. It's not permanent. It's not even constructed to be permanent. So we do understand the vulnerabilities that we have with it. So that emergency connection with the MWRA will provide supplemental water should it be needed.
Okay, thank you. The other question I have is whether we can get compost from the town. Some towns nearby, they offer free compost.
Yeah, so we don't have the ability, the space to do that right now. The thought would be to, and I do know there are a number of communities that actually, collect a lot of their organic waste, and they have, the space or whatever. You've got to turn it over. You've got to process it. It's got to age and all of that. Unfortunately, at this point in time, we don't have that ability.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes, next up is Jennifer. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure, thanks. Well, just to follow up on the question about compost, Tom, what becomes of the leaf and grass clipping yard waste? Is that possibly available to residents as compost, or is that all trucked off site as well?
Yeah, so we actually remove that regularly. We've got arrangements with area companies that accept that type of debris. So we haul regularly. We chip things, but it's not something that we get to a condition where it would be desirable or whatever from homeowners or residents.
Okay, so are businesses purchasing that? Is that a revenue stream for the town, or?
No, it's a disposal cost to the town.
Oh, okay. We have to pay them to take it.
Yeah, we haul it ourselves. We have to pay them to accept it.
Okay. All right. Sorry, that was just a follow-up. Two other questions though about the transfer station. Back in the day, there used to be separate bins, and people were individually responsible for putting clear glass, green glass, brown glass, tin cans, and metals, and so on. It seemed to me, excuse me, that type of a system was less susceptible to contamination. So I'm wondering if going back to that type of a system, getting away from the single stream no sort, has been considered, and or whether some sort of a hybrid of the two might have been considered in an effort to reduce contamination and increase the value of the product.
Yeah, I mean, I do know of communities. I'm thinking about, I vacation periodically in North Conway, New Hampshire, and the place that we stay at, they give you a little, note how to get to the recycling center, and I go down there, and you're right. I mean, some of these places, it's very well managed. It does require a lot of staffing. I know that Wellesley has been used as an example. They're almost like the flagship for recycling centers, but they are heavily staffed because you need to enforce that. You need to police that. People have to be watched on making sure that they're putting the green glass and the brown glass and newspaper versus cardboard and those types of things. So I'm not sure, to be honest, what the efficiency was when there was separation back at the transfer station. I do know that it does take a fair amount of policing and enforcement to achieve that. Many of the facilities, such as Casella and those companies that have these resource recycling facilities, they've converted entirely to single stream, and therefore many of these only accept single stream recyclables. So to go back to a situation where we were actually separating things out, we've looked at it, we've talked about it at staff and Board of Public Works level, but it just, for a number of reasons, does not seem like it's a feasible way to continue. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and then just one last question. The give and take, I understand that that's actually required by the state in order to receive certain credits or allowances, that that somehow our operation of the give and take is regulated. Is that true, that there's some DEP regulations associated with removal of items from the waste stream?
Yeah, I think that I can't, if it is, I'm not aware that it's regulated, that it's mandated, that we have to have it. You're right. I mean, they heavily urge people to, if they can do anything they can to keep things out of the solid waste stream, they encourage that. So for that reason, we do get points in that dividends grant program for having a give and take. I know personally, it was when we did close it down during COVID, and it was that was a big. People were very concerned about that, so they were glad when we opened it back up again.
Right. Well, I think it's a marvelous service to provide, but I feel that it's that too much of the material goes straight into the solid waste bin without allowing citizens the chance to actually use it to its full capacity. I know there's a whole spectrum there, and back back in the day it was the pendulum perhaps it swung too far and too much was being accepted and allowed to sit for hours and get broken and just create a mess that the staff then had to deal with. But I'll just put in my 2 cents that I think it could be more less restrictively managed to both better our waste stream going out and to the services of the citizens that do use it. So,
Okay.
Someone else to jump in here now. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I remember when the give and take was out in the open air, and whenever it rained, that was the end of the give and take that day. So next up is Evelyn, if you would like to unmute. Unfortunately, I cannot yeah.
Oh, okay. I just want to follow up on Jennifer. Absolutely missed the old give and take, and I feel really bad about this new arrangement, which I agree with everything she said, and I just think it's too bad. But that's not my question. My question is what's the present PFAB number in Wayland, just on the wells, and then is there one for MWRA? That's it.
Yep, so we've got 4 sources of water in town. Happy Hollow exceeds, it's right around 24 parts per trillion. Baldwin Pond is around, I think 5. Chamberlain was 18.7 in December. So we are very close to that 20 parts per trillion at Chamberlain. And Campbell, I think was, I actually don't recollect, but it's nowhere near the 20 parts per trillion. So with the non-detect PFAS that's coming out of Happy Hollow, the treated water being non-detect, all the water blended in town, it's difficult to get a hard number, but it's below 10, which is well below the 20 parts per trillion. The MWRA, they report that they have traced to non-detect levels. So they, in essence, when we need to activate the emergency connection that I was speaking of earlier, there'll be non-detect PFAS coming into the town through that source, as well as received through the proposed permanent connection.
So the commingled in on the wells in town, what's that bottom line number?
I think it's the only thing that I can tell you is that we sample at a number of locations around town. Most recently in January, we sampled all of the schools because it is blended. All of those 4 supplies come in, they go to the tank all together, and the locations that were reported at the schools was at I'm not recollecting the exact figures right now, but it was, the schools were comfortable enough that they, ceased, offering bottled alternative water and opened up the fountains back up again. So it's, I think it's sub 10, it's below 10 parts per trillion would be the blended amount.
So will the water department start publishing those amounts again?
Yes, everything is online. If you go to the town's website, in the top right-handish side of the screen, you'll see PFAS, a PFAS link. You click on that, and there's a tremendous amount of information that also includes all of the sampling data.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
And that was a great thing that at the schools they could turn those water bubblers back on, because that was a lot of single-use plastic water bottles that were the schools were going through every day. Lisa, you have another question?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
You can? Oh, good. Back on the possibility of trash pickup, is many friends express the surprise that we don't have trash pickup here in Wayland, and many people do pay for their own trash pickup. And would it not be cost effective for Wayland to have curbside pickup for all households, all the people who are now paying for an alternative pickup could, I mean, all that they're paying could contribute to the town coffers. So, and then there are many people for whom it's just not possible to come to the transfer station because of illness or whatever. So there are a lot of arguments anyway for curbside, and I'm wondering what the arguments are against it.
I mean, it's a subject that's been discussed at the Board of Public Works over the last number of years. And, you know, I think there certainly is an understanding that having residents have to address this on their own individually, you know, is something that, you know, is less than desired. You know, there are folks that, you know, the transfer station, you know, it offers these amenities. You know, it's believed that having that transfer station as the town provided, you know, source of receiving and disposing of these materials is adequate. But, you know, there are also many that think otherwise and think that a curbside program would be more beneficial, you know, for the town. I think you'll find that communities that are operating a transfer station such as ours are few and far between. I think you'll see a lot of communities have converted over to and offer a curbside program. What we'll wind up doing is really doing a financial analysis on, you know, the cost of operating the transfer station versus the cost and benefit of having a curbside program. And like I said, the communities that I've worked at prior to Wayland, you know, we had curbside, which was, you know, successful, and it was well received and well appreciated. We had a very active and progressive recycling center that still allowed people, because when you have curbside, a lot of the stuff aside from bag trash, you pay for. You pay extra for a lot of things, whether it's white goods, you're trying to get rid of a refrigerator, you're trying to get rid of, you know, an old wood stove, those types of things. Some will take it, some will not. The ones that take it are going to charge you a lot for that service. By offering a location in town to bring yard waste and these types of things, metal goods, white goods, you know, rigid plastic, having that facility or maintaining that facility is well received.
Well, could you do both? I mean, have the yard waste collected where it is now, but also have the curbside pickup?
Yes, you could. It would be yeah, that is regularly done. It's regularly done to have curbside and also retain the recycling center. So it wouldn't be, you wouldn't have the trash component. It would be reduced to just recycling services.
Fewer than half of the households in town apparently use the transfer station.
Yeah, there was, like I said, when I arrived here, it was well over 1,800 stickers. Last year, we reported 1,762.
Yeah, so,
you know, costs are going up, and our, you know, revenue stream is going down. So it's an issue we're going to have to face.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Another advantage of having curbside pickup by one hauler would also be less haulers driving through our streets. I've heard
Right.
that a lot as well. Then we have one more question that was typed in. Is it possible to visit the Give and Take and Book Exchange without having a sticker? Some condo owners here are very interested in that, but they have their own trash pickup. So is there a different sticker they could buy, or would that be open to them somehow?
I have to say, at this point in time, you need to have a sticker to utilize those functions. As we're sitting here talking, thinking about the option of providing that to non-sticker holders, I'd have to give it some thought. We do consider regularly, some of the services that we offer there. Could we offer them to non-sticker holders? Trying to gauge the benefit of doing that. What is the environmental benefit? What is the functional benefit of doing that, while still trying to, because you need to be fair to the people that are paying $165 a year to use the facility. We have to be mindful of offering services to those that don't purchase that, and there is a balance. So I don't think I have an answer right now, but I can tell you that we consider these things regularly.
Yeah. Another question is, can we recycle bags now? Plastic bags, I guess.
I think we do have a place, a bin, a container for the acceptance of those. And I will affirm that. And if we don't, then I'm thinking we do, because we've talked about this from time to time. And in another community, I had an arrangement. There's few uses for those bags. One use was that they use those plastic bags to fabricate Trex material. The composite material that people build their decks out. And we had an arrangement where we took our bags, brought them to a local grocery store, who obviously also collects them, and they pass them along to some sort of a mechanism where they were transferred to a company down in Pennsylvania that was making Trex. But I think we do have a location.
I see in the chat, we used to have plastic bag recycling at the transfer station, but it stopped after COVID. And I myself also do not remember that bin returning. So you may want to look into that. Yeah.
I will look.
Okay.
And Jennifer? Do you have another question? Yeah.
I did, and I've forgotten what I was going to ask. I'm going to lower my hand and think, and if I remember, I'll chime in.
It happens to all of us. Yeah, we're getting close to the end here. Mary writes, my understanding is that plastic bags go in with the orange bags. So no separate, that's Mary's understanding, no separate diversion of the plastic bags. Laurel, do you have a question?
Yes, thanks. I worked with the Boy Scouts for many years, and those cans and bottles that people donate really have funded a lot of Eagle projects around town. I just wanted to share that. So it's a great service. And if I could ask a near-term question, as a gardener, the water restrictions of late have really been hard. Can we get a sense of where we might be this coming summer?
So the restrictions are put into place for two reasons. One is that there is a drought management task force, a state association that monitors drought conditions, and they actually establish levels of drought, throughout the season. And through our Water Management Act permit, when they activate particular levels, we in turn then have to provide conservation measures, and those include having a ban. So in previous years, the restriction on outdoor water use, primarily automatic irrigation, underground irrigation systems, has been prohibited between May and September. This past year, things changed a bit. They got a little bit more critical, and I mentioned earlier that Baldwin Pond Treatment Plant was operating at half capacity. We were struggling with the Happy Hollow PFAS system. So the Board of Public Works has a mechanism whereby they can vote to have an emergency conservation restriction in place, and that's what we did. We actually activated that, not only because of the drought management regulation, but the fact that we had concerns here with those two locations operating at partial capacity of being able to provide sufficient water during those high demand periods. So, you know, this year, this summer, I don't envision needing an emergency conservation mandate, but depending upon what Mother Nature does, that drought management task force may indeed implement, you know, conservation levels that that would then cause us to implement those restrictions that you see.
One question with regard to that is, are there any restrictions on private wells? How do those private wells influence the public availability of water?
So it's a great and timely question. The Board of Public Works has been discussing this probably over the course of the last 2 or 3 meetings. So the answer to, do we have the authority to manage that, is no. I mean, I can control the public water system and how it is used, but I don't have any jurisdiction over private wells. There has been some thought about working with the health department, who they actually at least track and monitor private wells in town, working with that board in implementing a moratorium on, you know, folks using their private wells. You know, I am certain that it will cause great debate over the town's, you know, jurisdiction to do that. Scientifically, there are some that will tell you that the water that we use, or the wells that we use to provide water, are relatively shallow, 60 feet. People that drill wells for their irrigation systems, private wells, are going down sometimes hundreds of feet. And it's really different water supplies. They don't really interact with one another. So there are some that would say that there is no relationship between those two, between our wells and private wells. But there are, you know, there are others that think, you know, we really need to preserve what we have, and that you know, private wells to be used for irrigation are not wise, you know, environmentally. So it's a question that's being spoken about right now through, you know, through 2 boards anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Lee, you have another question? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, so I resonated your question about the private wells, because I have a neighbor who drilled a well last year, and then he said, look at me, and I can water all I want, and his lawn was like always watered, and I don't know whether that lowers the overall underground level. So anyway, my question, the question about you buying plastic bags to throw away garbage, I could understand that it is for getting some revenues, and so people try to conserve it because they have to buy it. But on the other hand, you basically have another piece of plastic wrapped around the whole thing and then throw it away, and that adds more plastic to the garbage. Unless you can keep your garbage for a long time in a very large one, and even in the summer, it's really kind of, I see a lot of people just use their white clear plastic bags and put it in this one large plastic bag. That just adds more plastic to the, if there's another way that's a little better for the environment.
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, as you do find that people, I understand what you're saying, that they're putting their they're putting their garbage inside their kitchen or whatever under counter container, and it's a small plastic bag, and then they take that plastic bag and they throw it into that big 32-gallon, and they might get 4 or 5 of the smaller bags into the 32-gallon, which then they bring in. So that's 2 layers of plastic. I do see what you're saying. I'm not aware of any program that offers a container, more biodegradable than, because there are strength issues. People, continually talk to us about the strength of bags and, things splitting open if they overpack them and all of that. I guess my point right now in talking would be that although they do cost, the cost increases. If you buy the smaller bags, you buy medium ones, you're not double, you wouldn't be doubling things up like you're describing. But I do see your point. But I don't have a resolution, at hand.
We have hit 2:30. So Tom, do you have 5 more minutes? There are 2 more questions. There's one in the chat, and then Lisa has another.
Oh, yeah, I can stay as long as you need me, as long as you have access to the connection.
Great. Yes, we continue. So anyway, we're recording this, so if you have to leave, you can catch the tail end here on the recording. So in the chat, I have a question. Is there need for a second storage tank? We have only one, right?
We have one. We had 2. I think a decade ago, one was demolished. So the answer is yes. So the tank that we operate right now is 75 years old. And it is necessary to have a tank in town, and we have no redundancy. And we are aware of significant work that has to be done to that tank to be able to continue using it. And we don't have the ability to take it offline. So the Mass DEP on an annual basis does what they call a sanitary survey of our water system. And they, in their report, the resulting reports, put us on notice that we are, highly vulnerable with just having one tank, and that there is a great need for us to advance, the construction of a second. So we do have that in our capital construction request.
So I'm just curious where, I guess you have to keep the old tank in place and then build the second one, not in the same place. Are there places in Wayland where that kind of siting is straightforward?
So it's a great question. We actually did a survey about 5 years ago on possible locations to locate a tank. And a number of considerations, who owns the land? Does the town own it? Does somebody else own it? We'd have to buy it. What are the elevations? Is the infrastructure in place that we could convey water from that tank? Those types of things. As a result of that consideration, that evaluation, the determination was made that we'll actually locate the tank on the same property where the other one was dismantled. It'll be a smaller tank. We don't need to have, that's a 2 million gallon tank on Reeves Hill. We could have a smaller one that provides adequate capacity. And what it also does is it also provides pressure to the town as well, and moderates that pressure. So our proposal is to construct a new, smaller tank adjacent to the existing one where the old one was demolished.
Great. One last question from Lisa, and I think that's when, after that, we'll wrap it up. Lisa, do you have a question?
Yeah. Trying
Oh.
to unmute. Yeah, sorry. Can
We
you
can hear you now.
hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Just a comment about those plastic bags. Most of my trash is plastic bags. Everything you buy at the grocery comes in a plastic bag. So I have to buy more plastic bags to throw out my plastic bags. And that is really kind of irritating. And I know Concord has a barrel system where you get or at least they used to, you get a barrel and you put a sticker every 6 months on the barrel to show that you've paid for the pay-as-you-throw trash collection. That's my understanding about Concord. But anyway, my other question is, just to recap, when would we be seeing MWRA water in our system from the emergency connection? What's the soonest we would have MWRA water?
I think the soonest we'll see it is August of this year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. I think that's all of the questions in the chat. If anyone else has anything else. I think thank you so much, Tom. This was extremely illuminating and clarifying on these two very important topics, of course, basic needs for all of us. And I thank you for also answering all these questions, and everyone who came as well, of course. So with that, we will let everyone go out and play in some more snow. Thank you, Tom.
All righty, my pleasure. I'm glad that you found it helpful.
Very much.